All right, everyone. Welcome back from lunch. I hope that the conversation is continuing to unfold. We are very lucky to have the mathematical cosmologist Brian Swimme joining us from the state of Washington virtually. Brian is a professor at the California Institute of Integral Studies in the same program that I teach in, philosophy, cosmology, and consciousness. Brian got his PhD in mathematics from the University of Oregon in the late 70s, studying gravitational dynamics. And for the last 20 or 30 years, he's been telling the scientific story of the universe in a way that can allow human beings to feel more at home here. Not to feel like an anomaly or an accident on the periphery of a largely mechanical, meaningless process, but human beings, he tells a story of the universe such that human beings can feel like an integral part and to begin to take responsibility for our role in this universe. I've learned a great deal from Brian about how science can become re-enchanted, how science can contribute, along with the world's religions, to developing a new human story for the whole human community on this planet that doesn't undermine our religious differences and our unique cultural perspectives, but that celebrates them, just like we would celebrate the diversity of species in an ecosystem. So I'll leave it at that and let Brian take over to tell one story of the universe from his evolutionary enchanted perspective. So thanks, Brian, and please welcome Brian virtually to us here in Television.
Yours, Brian.
Thanks, Matt, and thank you for that warm applause. Wow, I feel so welcomed, and it's really a thrill to be with you. I want to thank all the organizers for including me. I love to be part of these conversations. I think it's an exciting moment, and I'm ready to learn via your responses, I hope as much as you might learn from me, maybe more. So first of all, I'm wondering if is the audio working?
Yes.
Okay, fabulous. All right, and well, let me start off by saying that this topic of the relationship between science and spirituality is profoundly important, and one of the principal inspirations for my life in terms of philosophy is Alfred North Whitehead, who had a very strong opinion about this topic that we are exploring this weekend. Matt, can you quote Whitehead on this point?
On science and spirituality and science and religion?
The way in which the future depends upon the relationship between them. I can't quite get it perfect.
Yeah. Can I grab that mic? I think so.
There's a quote Whitehead says, I believe it's in a book he wrote called Religion in the Making, that religion must face change with the same spirit that science faces change. And Whitehead's not the type of thinker that would want to replace religion with science. He thinks, religion has an important role that will continue despite our scientific advances, but he thinks that religion needs to learn from science where any factual claims it may have thought it was making about the universe are contradicted by science. Religion should adapt to that, and that Whitehead thinks that the true value of a religious teaching can only be enhanced by correcting mistaken claims of fact. So he saw science and religion as mutually enhancing, ideally.
Nice. Yes. I guess I want to emphasize just the significance of this endeavor. He also stated that the relationship that we are working out between the scientific and the spiritual traditions will determine the future of humanity. So there's a way in which there's nothing that's more important than this discussion. Other things are as important, but it's hard to imagine something more important than the future of humanity, especially in terms of its relationship to the enveloping Earth community. So I also wanted to pick up on the word spiritual. There are different ways of talking about spirituality and spiritual, and I just wanted to get mine out there. I like a very inclusive orientation to the word, and that spiritual refers to the whole of things. So there are so many different ways of speaking about the whole of things, but whatever orientation one takes towards the whole of things is a spiritual orientation. And I very much like that. So instead of setting up a division between the scientific approach and the spiritual approach, there's a way in which we can see these as in conversation. Now, the last thing I would say, and this is my fundamental hypothesis, and that is that humanity, in terms of its consciousness, is in the midst of a big change. The word consciousness is another challenging word. I will be saying more about it, but maybe just here at the beginning, I'm going to say that consciousness for me is something like a synonym for spirituality. I want those two words to be seen in their largest form. Okay, and so I would say maybe to say one more thing about consciousness, that for the most part, modern society occupies a form of consciousness that we call Cartesian, and this as we all know, but just to remind ourselves, the Cartesian orientation is dualistic, so that we tend to think of, just without thinking about it, our society encourages us to be comfortable with the view that the consciousness is something that humans enjoy, and we're conscious of a universe out there. And then there's a separation, even more, that the universe out there that we're conscious of is devoid of consciousness and mind. Now, this is an area of huge debate and investigation, but I simply wanted to lift it up to say that my hypothesis here and in my life is that Cartesian form of consciousness is breaking down and another form is emerging. And so I'm deeply convinced. It doesn't mean I'm right, but I'm deeply convinced that one of the powerful ways in which Cartesian consciousness is breaking down comes from the discovery of our universe in its evolutionary form. It's been evolving for 14 billion years. We didn't know this. René Descartes didn't know this. Isaac Newton didn't know this, so that I'm saying that this discovery is pounding away at Cartesian consciousness and actually deconstructing it. At least it can, if a person is open to it. So there's the word consciousness then, because it's so complex, but there's a modern understanding of consciousness, and that would be it's something taking place inside the human brain. And then there's an emerging cosmological sense of consciousness, and that's really what I'm talking about today. And I really look forward to your reflections on this. So I have what I've prepared for our moment together has two parts. The first part is the universe that we've come to know. So I say we've discovered a 14 billion year evolving universe, and I'd like to get us all on the same page by giving a narrative of this evolutionary event. And then the second part is related to the first part. The second part is to talk about the way in which this story of the universe is impacting human consciousness. And so I just to give it a phrase, I'm saying that the emergence of this knowledge of the evolving universe is leading us from Cartesian consciousness to a cosmological consciousness. And what I mean by cosmological consciousness, I'm hoping will be clear. And if not, we can say more about it in our discussion together. Okay, so here's the first part of my presentation, and that is this new story of cosmic evolution. Another word, at least my favorite word for cosmic evolution. The problem with the word cosmic is that it connotes something kind of airy and maybe unreal. So it's not my favorite phrase, but a word that is widely used is cosmogenesis. I don't know who the first person was who used cosmogenesis. Certainly Pierre Teilhard de Chardin used it a lot. I think that's where I learned it. But it's a scientific word, and it's also a spiritual term. It's simply the way in which the universe has developed. So here we go. We're starting off then. This image, for those of you that want to explore it further, is called the Wilkinson map. Many of you know it. It's our earliest piece of empirical evidence of our universe. It's taken very, very, very close to what we regard as the beginning of our universe. I'll say more about what we're looking at, but I need to say a word or two about the word I just used. I said the beginning of our universe. Now, when I say the beginning of our universe, I mean of the known universe. So there are theories that this known universe is one part of a larger universe about which we know nothing. But I just want to emphasize the fact that we can't determine if our experience of the universe is the experience of the entire universe or just that part of the universe that we have experience of. I want to emphasize the limits of knowledge here. So I'm happy to focus my thinking in terms of the known universe, rather than going off and to speak about maybe an infinite number of other universes about which we have no information. So this is the earliest image we have of our known universe. This was the lack of structure. The early universe is just hydrogen and helium, and those are very tiny little atoms, and then there's light flowing through them, and yet this was our beginning. So we're looking at the early universe. Now, one more thing I wanted to say is this, that obviously we can't go back in time to take a picture. So this light has come to us. We have developed the sensitivity to detect these particles of light from the beginning of time. So I think about this a lot, and I think it's so amazing to think that humans have been wandering around the planet Earth for 200,000 years, and during every day of that journey, the light from the beginning of time was soaking them. But they had not yet developed the form of consciousness that was necessary to detect this. Now that phrase, they hadn't developed the form of consciousness yet, that is something that we will come back to over and over again. I hope not too many times, but that is the basic idea that I'm trying to develop, is that humanity had to develop its consciousness in order to detect the beginning of the universe and many other things. And the calculations are these. So I'm cupping my hand like I'm going to drink some water. If you cup your hand, and would you all do this? Because I don't have a lot of experiential exercises, but this is one of them. So if you just cup your hands together, and right there in that space of your hands, we have calculated there are 7,000 points of light from the birth of the universe. I mean, it's an idea, so I'm trying to bring it home, that right now, passing through our moment is the light from the beginning of time. Okay, so now I'm going to move on. Is it still working? Can you see this?
Yeah.
Okay, good. So now this happens to be my favorite spiral galaxy. It's called the Whirlpool Galaxy. And you can't see it unless you have a telescope, but I guess you could even pick it up with binoculars. I'm not sure about that. But it's, it's such a magnificent galaxy. I mean, look at the form. It's just stunning. And it happens to be 30 million light years away. So I was talking about those points of light from the beginning of time. Those points of light have been traveling for 14 billion years. Here, when we look at the Whirlpool Galaxy, the light has been traveling for 30 million years. So that's why we say it's 30 million light years away from us. But I want you to be able to relate to it personally. And let me tell you, it's right below the handle of the Big Dipper. So if you can imagine the Big Dipper as a pot on the stove that's really hot, and you might take a pad to grab on to the bottom of the handle, lift it up, your hand would be right where the Whirlpool Galaxy is. It's just below the handle. And there it is, 30 million light years away. And what stuns me so much about the spiral galaxy is the structure. It's the structure, the spiral arms. And it was, we didn't know anything about other galaxies before the 20th century. We didn't even know if they existed. And so then we discovered, wow, these galaxies, they're outside of our own Milky Way galaxy. And then in the 1960s, some Israeli astrophysicists realized that the structure itself was the creation of the galaxy. It wasn't there in a haphazard way. It wasn't there accidentally. It was the way the galaxy was putting itself together. And the way they talked about it is that these waves are passing through the galaxy, and as they pass through, they ignite star birth. So that even though it looks like that, if you look at the galaxy's arm, even though that looks like a rigid structure of matter that's spinning, it's not. It is actually a manifestation of an invisible field that's passing through. And as it passes through, it ignites the star birth so that we see, with the movement of this arm, we see new generations of stars cropping up. So there is the whirlpool galaxy. And here I wanted to speak about what I just mentioned, and that is that as the density wave passes through the galaxy, it passes through clouds of hydrogen and helium. And as it passes through, it causes a collapse. So this is an image of some gas clouds that are in the process of collapsing to give birth to stars. So in our Milky Way galaxy, there are approximately 200 billion stars, and they're being created all the time. So they're coming forth from the dynamics of the galaxy and have their moment of existence as the suns of the Milky Way. So this is an actual image of our sun. And one of the great questions that humans have asked, who knows how far back, but one of the great questions was, what is the nature of the stars? What are they about? And so we imagined many things, and then this process continued. I mean, during the time of in the classical period of civilization, certainly in the classical Greek civilization, one of the speculations was that the star was a god, and then later it was an angel. Scientists have continued this process, and it was in the 1950s that they speculated and then theorized that the stars were giving birth to new elements in their core. So they were fusing elements, and in that process, they were releasing energy. So the star, then, at least one dimension of the star is that it is a vast alchemical world where elements are actually being fused into new elements. Our sun is 1,000,000 times as big as Earth. The vastness of the sun is something that was not known in classical times. In fact, it was hard to imagine something that large. But now we have the sense of the magnitude. But one of the most amazing discoveries really is that because of the thermonuclear activities in the sun, 4 million tons of it are being transformed into energy second by second. It's just such a amazing fact. So the sun, we might complain about it and so forth, but what has to be understood is that the energy from the sun is enabling everything about our lives. So just like I wanted you to connect to the birth of the universe with the light that has arrived here from the birth of the universe, so too, I wanted you to just reflect on the fact that our lives are powered by the light that comes from the sun. Everything about us is, we require food, and then we might eat animals, we might eat plants, but if we eat animals, the animals eat the plants. So that ultimately, our energy comes from the energy captured by the plants. And so we are all of us, these solar events. Okay, now I'm jumping from the realm of stars. I'm jumping from the realm of stars into the realm of planets, and our planet in particular. And so here we have these gorgeous salmon. I'm actually in the Pacific Northwest, and this is the totem animal of our region. And the amazing fact is that, now going back to the previous slide, because Earth was molten, we have the development of life. So on other planets that are smaller than Earth, they fixate and become rock solid, literally rock solid. Whereas with Earth, all of the interior is liquid, magma, and because of that, Earth could develop into life forms. And so this ongoing evolution of the universe brings forth life. Okay, now and then as we know, coming out of life is various forms, including the human. But now I want to go to my second part, the second part of my talk. And given that story of the universe, I want to suggest that another form of consciousness is emerging because of it. So here we go. We're actually going to return to those images, but I wanted to start off with this one, the orangutan. I mean, it's just so stunning how similar we are, the primates. I mean, it's just so similar. I mean, it looks like a 60s hippie a little bit. You know, just, I mean, look at those eyes. So here we go. I want to talk about the evolution of consciousness, and I want to give you my my definition first. my definition of consciousness. And that is, consciousness is that which enables the universe to enter a particular being, a particular animal, a particular plant. Consciousness is that which enables the universe to enter into the being of an organism. There's many different things that could be said. I'm not claiming this covers all of consciousness. It's just the one part of consciousness I would like to discuss with you. Okay, so as a way of entering into this, I have a visual aid. Okay, can you all see it? Yeah. Okay, so it's a leaf from a madrona tree, and I wanted to pick up on the color. Does it come across as sort of yellow and green?
Yes.
Okay, good. All right, now, so here we have this leaf, and without really thinking about it, all of us, when we look at the leaf, we say, well, I'm aware of the leaf. Right there in your hand, Brian. I have consciousness of the leaf. Great. Now, and that's how we go about our day. We're looking at a tree. Well, we have consciousness of a tree. And with the moon, consciousness of the moon, awareness of the moon. We're aware of the presence of the moon. Now, I want to just reverse that and talk about the way in which it is consciousness which enables the leaf to enter into you. So, I mean, it's the most natural thing if we stop a second and think about it. That is, I mean, there you are, right, in Colorado. You're in Colorado, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I was so afraid to bring that up because it'd be so embarrassing if I got the wrong state, but okay. So there you are in Colorado, and clearly the leaf has had to travel all the way through you in various ways involving, the electromagnetic interaction and so forth, but it has traveled to you. So, and that whether this is true, whether or not we were in the same room or not, it's underlined by the fact that we are in different states. But here's the amazing thing, that the yellow is something that you and the universe are creating. It's an amazing power that this leaf can come alive inside of us. That's the point I'm trying to get across, is that this is an amazing achievement of the universe. It's not just of the human and the human brain. I want to break out of that and talk about it as it's a community achievement involving billions of years. So I want to dwell on this fact I have a second visual aid, all right? I'm actually very proud of this. This is a meteorite. Okay, let me put down my first one. This was given to me by one of my doctoral students, Linda Gibler. Not Drew Dellinger, I might want to point out. I'm still waiting for a gift from him. Come on, I'm kidding. So, but Linda Gibler gave me this meteorite. Now, so here's the point. This matter has been circling the solar system for billions of years, and then landed on our planet, and then was delivered to me. But It's made of the same materials I am made of. And you, it's the same material. So now, here's the evolution of consciousness. 4.5 billion years ago, this was very similar to Earth. And now look at, let's bring the leaf back into the picture here, all right? And the question is this: how much of the leaf enters into this rock? Is the rock experiencing yellow? Probably not. There's no nervous system. You know, with Alfred North Whitehead and Matthew Siegel, I think there is some kind of minimal experience taking place in the rock, but it's not anything like the experience of the geometric form of this leaf and its colors. So here you have the evolution of consciousness right here before your eyes. You and I started out like this. We started out like this, and we became who we are. And one way to compare, to talk about the evolution of consciousness, is to talk about how much of the universe is brought into ourselves in a simplistic way, which I hope is helpful. The evolution of consciousness, when it is in advance, enables more of the universe to enter into the experience of a particular being. Okay, so now going back to the orangutan. Now, you know, as opposed to the rock, the experience of the orangutan is profoundly similar to ours. It experiences colors. It experiences forms. Now, it experiences taste. I am not saying that its experiences of these sensations and emotions are identical with ours. I'm not saying that. I know they're different, that there'd be different kinds of foods that he would love that I wouldn't. So there's a different experience, but it's amazing how similar our experiences are. Even so, human consciousness has found a way of developing off further, not necessarily better, but it's another dimension of consciousness that enables more of the universe as a whole to enter into us. So here is an image of a troop of baboons, and I tell this story because I know the researcher who was living with the baboons. Her name is Dr. Barbara Smuts at the University of Michigan, and she had an amazing experience. Her experience, she was following the baboons around, and they got lost, which she said was kind of amazing because you know, you think of wild animals as never getting lost. She knew where they were trying to go, but for whatever reason, they got a little bit confused. And so, faced by this situation, they all just took a nap. All right, and which certainly what I do whenever I get stuck. And then she took a nap too, and the amazing thing happened when she awoke. She awoke because a juvenile male baboon was touching her finger in a very particular way. He was holding his finger up next to hers, and he was looking at them. So let me go to my next one here. he was looking at you see the fingernail there? It's just like ours. And so the little guy was looking at his finger and its fingernail and hers. And then he would look up at her face and with a kind of sort of surprise, then he'd look back at the fingers. So her interpretation of that was that, and mine too, is that this juvenile baboon was discovering a relationship, a similarity with these two rather dissimilar beings, humans and baboons. Even though we're dissimilar, there is a similarity. It was that pattern. Now that recognition of a pattern that goes beyond superficial differences was thought about by Immanuel Kant, someone else that Matt Siegel has studied and knows very, very well. And so Kant talked about this in terms of the imagination. And what this young primate was experiencing was the power to connect the dots and to see an overriding pattern of similarity. And that form of imagination is what led to so much of human consciousness that we continue to develop. We noticed similarities in the movement of the heavenly bodies, and we found ways to celebrate that ritualistically, so that we built these like Stonehenge, so that it would identify solstice. So this deep pattern that we found could be passed on to all the members of our group. And this ability then to find the patterns and to see the larger order of things continued to develop throughout human history. And it was exactly the power that led to our scientific investigation of the universe. This is a great picture. It is Albert Einstein there on the left, but the guy on the right is Edwin Hubble. And there's a great story connected to this. Albert Einstein created the mathematical equations that predicted the universe was expanding. His symbols predicted that, but he didn't believe it, so he changed them. And then it was Edwin Hubble who actually looked out and saw. He measured the expansion itself. And so he called up Albert and said, you should come down here and have a look. And so this is the moment when Einstein went to Mount Wilson and recognized that he had lost confidence in his own power of imagination. But the reason I'm bringing up is because I want to now return to just a few of the images of the universe and to see if we can see them with the full awareness that's possible. So here we have again the birth of the universe. All right. Now, Cartesian consciousness is looking out at a universe of objects out there. That's the hallmark of Cartesian consciousness. It regards itself as looking at a universe of objects. But we now know, because of this powerful development of the imagination, we now know that we are composed of what we are looking at. The hydrogen and helium atoms that we're looking at complexified through time and became galaxies, stars, planets, and ourselves. Now, including, and here's the punchline, including our awareness of them. That's the breakthrough insight that we have to take in. Let me say it again. We are looking out at the universe that constructed our power of mind to look out at that which constructed us. The outer has become the inner, aware of the outer. This switchback, this recursive move is a doorway through which we leave Cartesian consciousness behind and enter into a new form of consciousness. I want to give it a name, so I've called it cosmological consciousness. But here is another phrase that I like that may appeal to you. Cosmogenetic imagination. So cosmogenesis, take the adjective. We are developing a cosmogenetic imagination because we now know that the outer has become the inner, perceiving the outer. Let me do exactly the same thing I just did all over again. So my hope is that this becomes like, okay, Brian, we got it. Here we go. Here's attempt number 2. All right, so now we're looking at the Whirlpool galaxy. Cartesian consciousness is looking out at galaxies out there. Now, but we know something about this. We know that the galaxy has organized itself. It has created these density arms that have constructed stars that explode and become planets that become alive. So we are looking at the dynamics that gave birth to us. The phrase scientists use, it's a good phrase, is self-organizing dynamics. The self-organizing dynamics in the universe. Now, what's amazing is, once again, Immanuel Kant was the first thinker in the Western tradition to identify the self-organizing dynamics in life. He was thinking about life. Now we know that the galaxies exhibit the same self-organizing dynamics. I mentioned those Israeli astrophysicists. They and others, when they started to realize what they were seeing with the galaxy, they summarized it by saying, it's like they are alive. They're alive the way a cell is alive. So it is, so once again, we have this doorway that we can walk through. We can leave behind this attitude of looking at the Milky Way galaxy, say, and thinking of it as out there apart from us. And instead, we can take in the galaxy and ourselves and the process that enabled us to know the galaxy. All of it. We can take it all in. So you see, it's not just the sensations of the galaxy that enter into us. We are bringing more. We're advancing consciousness by bringing more of the order of the galaxy into our awareness. So we can say this, that the self-organizing dynamics that we're looking at give rise to our awareness of the self-organizing dynamics. Another way of summarizing this is to say the following. The galaxies, the Milky Way galaxy, not only gave rise to the complexity of our bodies, the Milky Way galaxy brought forth our awareness of the Milky Way galaxy. Another way of summarizing this is to say that the intelligent processes of the Milky Way galaxy have become aware of themselves through the human imagination. Okay, that's it.
Thank you, Brian. That was a wonderful tour of the evolutionary journey and a participatory view of it that I think really helps us appreciate ourselves as, emergent phenomena as part of this whole evolutionary journey. I was thinking as you were speaking that it's as though, evolution kind of literally means the unfolding of something. And it's as though, this description you gave us of the outside giving rise to the inside, aware of the outside. It's as though this self-organizing dynamic is a kind of self-organizing origami. And this universe is a process of folding inward upon itself, intensifying its capacity to experience.
Okay, I missed one word. Origami? Is
origami, yeah.
But say more about, because is that like a thing you make out of paper?
It's like a piece of paper and you fold it up. And so there's almost, this topological metaphor that you're giving us.
Yeah.
Of the outside folding into itself so as to be aware of itself. Evolution as this origami, this self-organizing origami. Seems like another image that we might use to capture.
But I like that, Matt, I like that phrase. Could you say it again? The universe folding into itself. Could you say that again?
The universe as a process of folding in upon itself to intensify its capacity for self-experience.
I love that. That's great. I love that. Yeah, folding in on itself. That's nice.
So it's expanding and folding in on itself.
Yes.
And it's as though, we look out at this background radiation, the light from 14 billion years ago, and the edge of the universe, the known universe, it's expanding increasingly, exponentially, faster and faster, at least it's accelerating. And our consciousness seems to be, through the evolutionary process, as this knowledge, we realize these insights there's an opposite acceleration inward.
Yeah, nice. Yeah, I love it. I love that.
So I'm sure you all have lots of questions for Brian.
Or comments, or corrections.
Yeah. So how we can do this is when you have a question, you can come up. You can even get in line or just wait for everyone to finish. But just stand here so Brian can see you. That's a good spot, right, Brian?
Maybe even a little closer.
A little bit closer. So yeah, lean in there and Brian can see your face.
Yeah. Great.
Since,
Yeah. Right there. Yeah. Right. Yeah.
Great. So who want to start? Let Brian know your name.
Perfect.
My name is David.
Hi, David.
Orang Hutan in the Malay language means forest people. And Edwin Hubble's girlfriend was a woman named Amy Semple McPherson, who founded the Angelus Temple in Los Angeles. So there's a connection between science and spirituality.
Wow.
Another thing, in 1978, when I was studying Vedic cosmology,
Yeah.
the Lord Shiva as Nataraja was described as the cosmogenetic force of the universe.
Whoa. Whoa. Whoa.
Yeah.
You know who said that?
That was 42 years ago. I mean, I could probably find it again. It was something that I got at the Vedanta Society in Los Angeles. So.
I would love that. I'd love that. Maybe if you could give it to Matt, he could give it to me. I love that.
In 1988, I interviewed Andre Linde. Are you familiar with him?
Andre, I missed the last word.
Linde.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah.
Yeah. And at that time, he was describing the formation of the universe, to simplify it enormously, as a phase transition.
Yes.
Has that theory been totally disproved, or is that still something that has credibility?
Well, that would be that would be generally accepted as a happy theory. However, there are some cosmologists that violently oppose it. So it wouldn't be accepted without question. It's still, I would say, in the realm of a really happy speculation, right? And so, but he would be a person who is very happy with the idea of like an infinite number of universes. Was he saying that back then?
I don't remember. I just remember being stunned with this idea that the universe was made in a scintilla as a phase transition from gaseous to solid.
Yeah.
And I thought that was really extraordinary, and I was trying to wrap my head around it. When I got home, I put a bottle of beer in the freezer. And when I opened the freezer, the beer was liquid. When I touched the bottle, it became solid.
Yeah.
I said, oh,
yeah.
wow.
Very nice.
I get it.
There's some empirical evidence, David. Nice. Thank you.
Anyone else? Come on up.
Hi, my name is Steve Dunn.
Hi, Steve.
Hi, I think you've already answered my first question, that with all due respect to entropy, that there is a tendency or bias in the universe towards self-organization. So I'll go to my second question.
Okay.
That there is a bias or tendency in the universe towards self-organization. And what is the self?
Is that C-E-L-L?
Self.
S-E-L-F.
Oh, yes. Okay. What is the self? What is the self?
Yes.
Yeah, great, Steve. That's a great question. Yeah, that's a great question. Yeah, no, I don't pretend to know. I like I can tell you something that one of my great teachers, Thomas Berry, what he said was, he talked in terms of the universe itself being the great self, the great self. He always used that phrase, and he said that every being in the universe has two dimensions. It has a small self and a great self. So I guess without even really dwelling on it too much, I've always been happy thinking of the universe as a great self. But to say more than that, I don't know. Yeah, that's a great question to ponder. Matt, what about you? What would you say?
The self is, maybe the self is still in the process of waking up to itself. And so for us to try to answer that question now is maybe it's the wrong question. It's more like, well, who are we becoming? Whoever we are becoming. And I mean, we in the largest cosmological, ecological sense, that is the self. So it's a self to come that we aim towards, that we are drawn towards, but that remains mysterious.
Yeah, that's nice. Yeah. No point in closing it off, because most likely the universe will continue to surprise itself. Yeah. Yeah, very nice.
I know there are many more questions. We've got plenty of time. I wanted to just briefly talk about Alpha North Whitehead a bit. And I hear in your, so you were describing this Cartesian dualistic consciousness, characteristic of the modern age, where human beings are the only beings with mind or subjectivity. The rest of nature is just a collection of objects. And then this way you were describing a more cosmological consciousness where when we're aware of something in the world, it's actually becoming a part of us.
Yeah.
And consciousness is this relationship that's not just something in our head. We're not making a little picture of the world in our head. We're actually communing with our environment. And consciousness is the field phenomenon of our participation with whatever it is that we're attending to.
That's great. Yeah, nice.
It's very much, you know, if there's the Cartesian consciousness that's dualistic, the way I heard you describing this new cosmological consciousness is very much like Whitehead's understanding of a universe full of vectors of feeling, and what it means to be conscious as a human being is to be, he called the human body a complex amplifier of the energy or the feelings flowing into us from our cosmic surroundings. So we're just amplifying what's already there. Our consciousness isn't generated just inside of us. It's a relationship to this wider field. And
yeah, very nice. Yeah.
So I was able to find some Whitehead quotes on science and religion that I'll close this off with, because I was trying to paraphrase earlier and didn't do it.
Yeah. Oh, good.
We'll get back to that. I think you have a question for Brian or a comment?
Wait, but I want to hear your question, but hold on, Matt, I want to pick up on one thing you said.
Sure.
And that is that I maybe just to, I kind of like, I'm emphasizing one point, but the, I was trying to say that the light from the sun is inside of us, right? So the energy of the sun, so the sun is inside of us. And also, when I showed you that first picture of the Wilkinson map of the birth of the universe, all of those, the hydrogen atoms from that time compose us. So we're composed of the atoms from the birth of the universe. We're filled with the energy from the sun. And then I was going to go back and just emphasize that, you know, our brains were designed by the fish. So that, you see, that the fish are inside of us, the sun's inside of us, the birth of the universe is inside of us, just like you're saying, Matt. We are the universe in a very particular form. And I love Whitehead's work on that. But thanks. Sir, next.
I've been contemplating recently the question of how our neurons evolve.
Yeah.
there's the vagus nerve, which connects the brain to the digestive tract, and they're finding how much the digestive tract is connected to the brain, and I would presume that's part of it.
Yeah.
It started off in the digestive tract of a fish, and the brain remembers those spots where it gets the best food, knows to return to that location. There's a group here a couple weeks ago. I don't know, maybe you know more about them. I saw a presentation. It's called the Neuromorphs, and they're doing AI-based neural network stuff, modeling the human brain, looking at the mathematics of the neural networks, the complexity of that. I don't know if you've looked into any of.
I haven't. I've heard of it, but I don't know it. But it doesn't. It's a great name, isn't it?
Yeah, it sounds like it's more than just bullshit.
Yeah, sorry, I don't know that field, but it's exciting.
Who else?
My name is Lucas. I'm very much connected.
Lucas?
I'm very much connected. What you say is that yes, we are part of what has been formed, what is still being formed from the Big Bang onwards, and maybe one of these atoms is part of me. Who knows? Yeah. And I'm very much part of that, and I can connect to that, and you can connect that the rules which govern or rule the galaxies billions of years away, light years away, they also are the rules here on Earth, and then they're the rules which make me, make the tree, and make the stone.
Yeah.
I, however, have to say, I think your analogy of self-organization, and that's I struggle with, because it's not.
Wait, I missed the word.
The self-organization.
Yes.
I struggle with.
Okay.
The reason is the following.
Yeah.
I mean, there are scientific reasons for that. There are more practical reasons of that. I can tell you, when I look into the room of my daughter, there is nothing like self-organization. but also, obviously, we're looking at one galaxy. We see the light coming from this galaxy. We understand self-organization there, and we look at the beautiful patterns of it. I think we ignore the black matter in the vast majority of the universe. We ignore the second theory, the axiom of thermodynamics. So I don't see self-organization as a mandatory principle. I see that heat is going always from warm to cold, and not the other way around, and that entropy needs to go up. So I don't know what you wanted to say with this, because I just can't link to that.
You just can't. What was the last phrase? What was the last phrase?
No, I can't relate to this. It's that self-organization,
yes.
Principle of our universe.
Yeah.
I know that entropy must go up.
Yes.
I just don't understand what you want to say with this. For me, entropy must increase, and it's what I was taught in school, what I had to write my exams about. And I understand there is self-organization in here. I understand that there is life, that we are humans, and life is highly organized. But that is the exemption from the big picture, from closed system universe. And I don't know what you wanted to say with that.
Hey, that's a great point. Yeah. There's nothing more discouraging than the heat death of the universe. And so we have to grab, I use the word struggle. We have to struggle with this. The second law of thermodynamics is powerful, and this is just as you described, just to emphasize that it's the movement of heat from a hot spot to a lower spot. And this is the creation of entropy. And so, geez, Brian, you're talking about self-organization. What about death? What about entropy? What about dispersal? I completely agree. that has to be talked about. So here I am talking about it. Now, here's the part that amazes me. Now this, I don't pretend to have an answer that will make everyone happy, because we're talking about one of the deepest principles in the universe, all right? I affirm it is absolutely fundamental. But watch this. The second law says that we move from a concentration of heat to a dispersal of heat. So if you take a hot cloud in the universe, it will cool down. That's the basic idea. It will cool down. Now, and then what you also said, Lucas, was, I try to get the phrase, it was, we don't see the movement in the other direction, from cool to hot, all right? That's the point I want to focus on, all right? The second law of thermodynamics, which is a brilliant insight into reality, was formulated in the 19th century. In the 19th century, the overall worldview, the overall cosmology, the overall philosophy was mechanical. And so the articulation of the second law comes from the investigation of machines, including the steam engine. And it's powerfully correct if we're only dealing with machines. If we're talking about the universe, it's leaving out half of what's going on. Here's an example. I have a cloud here between my hands, all right? It's 10 million miles wide. And it's cooling, and cooling. But some of it is growing hot, because some of it is actually collapsing down and forming a star. So we have this.
Brian, this is not against. I mean, well, I get it. If you use energy, that can happen. I get it. I can heat a pot of water, but I need energy. If I get somewhere energy from, of course it gets warmer. Of course it heats up. I just don't. I'm not sure the universe is self-organizing. I think if you look just at the galaxies, you're ignoring black matter completely.
Dark matter.
Whatever.
Yeah.
Okay? You're ignoring dark matter. Of course there are spots. Of course there are spots which are organizing. Of course there are new stars formed in some of all of this. But that is much, much more. And for me, when we want to talk about these things, and when we then want to talk about this, how they relate to our spirituality, I'm not sure that's true. I'm not an expert, I have to say. I'm not an expert. It just contradicts fundamentally to what I have learned when I went to school. And for me, this is critical, because we need to, if we want to connect the science to spirituality, I think we need to just make sure we get the science right. Now, I don't want to challenge you on that. Maybe you're right. I'm not an expert, okay? And I'm happy to reverse course, but it's
no.
a bit different from me, and it's just by looking at the galaxy, this doesn't cut it for me.
Well, Lucas, wait. Well, Lucas.
Yeah.
Sit down right there at the front. Sit down there at the front. Now give him the mic. And then look, we'd have a little bit of a conversation here. All right. Now I would say, because I don't think we are in disagreement, you and I. And so I actually don't think we are. I'd just like to say something else. I think about myself, I think I overcorrect what I see as a lopsided view of modern science. And I try to indicate how how I see that, it is that that especially 19th century physicists, they were captured by the way things are running down and how entropy increases. But they literally were not aware of cosmogenesis. They were not aware of it. So that in their speculations about the nature of things, they were unaware that all of this structure has emerged in 14 billion years. Now, listen, this is something that you can, this next statement I'm going to make, you can check out. All right? I don't want to say I'm an expert and I know and you don't know. I'm just saying, if you check this out, you will see what the experts think about this next statement I'm going to make. All right, here it is. In our understanding of science, all the way through the 20th century, we cannot account for the rapid emergence of the order that is in the universe. We don't know how it came about so rapidly. The conception of the building of order during the 19th century was that it had to do with accidental and random collection of atoms. But now we know and so everybody was happy with that because we thought the universe was infinite in extent. But if you just look into this a little bit, or if you know a physicist and you talk to them and you say, what if we just had a universe that proceeded accidentally by accidental accidents of atoms collecting together, what structures would exist in the universe after 14 billion years? And the universal answer among scientists is that we wouldn't have anything more complex than amino acids. So we just don't know where the structure came from. Now, so I have emphasized how the universe creates structure and how it's intrinsic to it. But what you are saying is equally real. So what I would say is this. One way for us to proceed is to say, we live in a self-organizing and a self-destroying universe. It's not adequate to talk about self-organization without emphasizing the destruction that the universe is carrying out. So it is, when we have the universe using energy to create a star, then the universe destroys the star. So for every new star, there's a destruction of a star. Both are going on. Now, I just want to say one little thing, one little correction, that is about dark matter. Dark matter is the principal power that creates the galaxies. So dark matter is actually part of the creation of the galaxies. And it's more important than the so-called baryonic matter. But that doesn't take away from your main point. Now here's another way of thinking about it. So here we are. We're on planet Earth. Life has existed for 3.8 billion years. And 99% of the forms of life that have been created have been destroyed. They've been destroyed. So you see, we don't live in a universe that just is self-organizing. It's also self-destructive. And that's the bizarre, amazing thing. So it is, if we're talking about spirituality, we can't simply identify with the positive construction. There's also the negative aspect of the universe tearing itself apart. I mean, the classic example of the creation of entropy in the universe is the supernova. So you have a supernova explosion. It builds order for 5 billion years. And then it tears it all apart. in a matter of minutes. I mean, like, it's just like when you look at this, it is so not like Genesis. I don't want to criticize religion, but I do want to criticize the way in which if we fixate on a former view of things, we miss what's going on. In Genesis, the image of creativity is that of a potter, right? It's shaping pots. And that's a good image of making things. But that isn't how the universe operates. The universe builds up and then tears down, and then builds up and tears down. And then the question is, this goes back to, I forget it, Stephen's question, what's the nature of the self, the great self? What's the nature of the great self? Is the great self just about organizing itself? No. It's about both organization and about destruction. Going back to my teacher, Thomas Berry, he had an amazing way. Thomas Berry's a Catholic priest. So he studied like Hindu spirituality, and he wrote books on Buddhism, and he's a very wide-ranging mind. And here was his view of God. He said the thing about God is that God and the demonic are very close. They're very similar. And the really challenging thing is that they keep changing places. They keep changing places. And I said, what do you mean they keep changing places? And he looked at me and said this. He said, God would just as soon kill you as look at you. And then I thought, so then I was left thinking about that forever, right? And so this is my current interpretation of that. That if there is spirituality in the universe, it includes a sacrificial dimension. That there's a way in which we have to be involved with both creativity and destruction. Because we too, if we have the image of the supernova, it rips itself apart so that future generations of planets might come forth. And I think we feel something like that. I do think that those of us that have a sense of the disaster taking place on the planet, we have a sense that we have to tear apart certain attitudes and certain institutional structures. They can't be allowed to continue because they're just, and we are part of those things. So we're actually destroying ourselves in part by enabling new generations of humans to come forth in a different way. So Lucas, I really do value your bringing up this destructive side. I'm not saying there's a simple solution, but it has to be included in our thinking. I would love to hear your response and what you're thinking about.
Well, my thoughts go all over the place right now. So there's spontaneous reaction to what we say. Yes, I think we are indeed saying very similar things. Relative to the cycle in the universe of creation and destruction, and to the translation of what happens on our planet. Me personally, I'm unwilling to take this cycle as an excuse of inaction and let it happen. I mean, you could sort of play and say, well, okay, it's just what happened. I mean, sooner or later it's going to be gone, and something new is going to evolve, emerge, and that's what it is. And I think that would be a dangerous conclusion out of it.
Yes, very.
That is one spontaneous thought I had. And then the other spontaneous thought is, I'm not sure I heard you right, but you spoke about God and devil and good and evil. good and bad. For me, there is actually, for me, there is when I look at the cosmos, I don't think there are two forces at play. For me, there's only one force at play. And it's for me very interesting where I ask myself sometimes, where is the definition coming from what is good and what is bad? You know,
the definition of what?
Well, it's sort of the common understanding, this is good and this is bad, when there is one. So it must be human made somehow, okay? So we have made it, and it's not, you know, I don't think death, destruction, is mandatorily something bad. I don't think it's, I mean, obviously, yes, it causes grief and all of this. I get all of that, but I don't think it's mandatory. So that's sort of my, and that's is a thought I had a couple of times already, is who actually says that is good and that is bad? And where is this all coming from in our society? And how is our society different from other societies? So this brings me back to spirituality. I only have an access to spirituality through Christianity, essentially, because that's more or less the only one I know. Call it ignorance. You know, but I'm interested in understanding how others look at this.
Beautiful. Yeah, no, I mean, we come together to explore these things together. And the fact that I love when you said you have all these ideas flowing through you, that just shows you the success of you know, coming together and struggling with these deep questions. There are no simple answers. Matt, we've run out of time, Matt. Thank you, Lucas.
You know, this issue of entropy and the second law of thermodynamics is one I've, you know, I'm not an expert either, but I've thought a lot about this because it's a problem. You know, to try to understand the universe as something creative, something self-organizing. You know, the skeptical response is always, well, you know, what about entropy? And like, you know, the famous 20th century physicist Sir Arthur Eddington said that the second law of thermodynamics is the closest thing to a metaphysical principle that science has, in the sense that if your theory contradicts the second law, well, it's worthless. But there's a way in which in the second half of the 20th century, with research on so-called far from equilibrium, open thermodynamic systems, like, you know, Ilya Prigogine, I think Belgian physicist and chemist, won a Nobel Prize for work in this area, where, you know, the 19th century scientists who came up with the laws of thermodynamics originally were working with closed systems,
yes,
engines and so on. But with open systems, something new becomes possible, where self-organization isn't contrary to entropy. It's actually, it's a byproduct of entropy, where, you know, at a larger scale, the law of entropy is not being contradicted, but locally, in order to arrive at an equilibrium faster, there can be pockets of order that will be generated that produce heat at a rate that dissipate heat faster.
That was essentially my argument.
Locally.
Yeah, locally, you can always look at planet Earth and say, but then the sun is relevant,
Right.
or even if you take the entire galaxy.
So I think I'll talk about this more tomorrow. John, did you have a comment or a question?
Yeah, question.
Thank you so much, Brian, both for today and for the universe story.
Oh, thanks, John. Thank you.
Yeah, I've been using that in my environmental studies program for 15 years. It's the opening reading of the program. Thank you for that.
Fantastic.
Right, to my daughters around the campfire. Question regarding what we were just talking about in terms of self-organizing versus self-destructive. And, you know, in ecology, resilience has become very popularly overused. But it's an idea of self-organization in a system that requires disturbance, requires disruption for a system to not get trapped in the conservation of resources, to be able to adapt and reorganize. I'm not a physicist or an astronomer or anything of that nature, but might resilience approach be a third way beyond between self-organization and self-destruction?
Yeah, very nice. I like that. Yes, right. Resilience. Beautiful, John. Very, very interesting. I never thought of that. That's really interesting. The in-between. That's great.
So Brian, my name is Pat Bailey. I'm the pastor of Christ Church here that's sponsoring this program. And I want to say
hi, Pat. Good to meet you.
Great to meet you. Thanks for being part of this. Also, we have used your materials for a lot of our conversation here and with our community.
God, fantastic.
Great gifts to us. You know, I was always amazed when I'd watch your stuff, and your cosmology was presented in what I consider a very spiritual kind of presentation of the story of the universe.
Oh,
and you did so without any religious language, which I thought was fantastic. And but I did see an article of yours, I think it was with a Catholic magazine, where you talked about some convergences between the cosmological story and some of the metaphors and symbols and concepts of Christianity. Yes. You'd like to say as much or as little as you would like about that, please.
Yeah, I certainly could. I would put it, well, I would put it, I already said what I think is the best I have to offer. And that is, it was the supernova. The supernova, what is the supernova an expression of? That was my question, especially after Thomas Berry. And it's an expression of the Christian notion of agape and the Jewish notion of hesed. I think it is both of those terms, you know, agape and hesed are within a religious context. It's just a pouring out of love for another, even to the point of, you know, self-destruction, if need be. If the mother has to give herself over and protect her children to the level of death, she will. And I just thought, well, I mean, that's an interpretation of the supernova. It just tears itself apart, and out of that action, we come forth. I mean, there's a way in which, going back to a mother or a father, or I mean, anyone who is deeply, deeply in love with something, you know, it could be a child, it could be a region, it could be a river, you know, that there's like almost a compulsion just to do whatever is possible to protect and to nourish. So I see that, where does that deep desire and passion come from? Well, you know, Christianity would have its way of explaining it. Judaism would have its way of explaining it. They could both be correct, but what I'm trying to suggest is we come out of a sacrificial event. We wouldn't be here without the star's sacrifice. And then someone would say to me, well, you know, the star doesn't know it's sacrificing itself. I know that. I know that. There's no nervous system. There's no brain. I know that. But the star is sacrificing itself in a stellar way. And so we, in a certain sense, we have a choice of sacrificing ourselves in a human way. It's either that or sit on the couch and watch TV. You know, I mean, are we going to give ourselves over so that life can come forth? I just feel this, I feel the resonance between some of these spiritual insights from our traditions and the way in which the universe operates. That's my favorite of all.
That's a good one.
Yeah. Teresa?
Hi, Brian.
Hold it. My God, a woman is speaking. This is fantastic.
Sure.
Yeah, they hear me speak a lot here. So I have a question for you. I'm interested in transformation, psycho-spiritual transformation, and the advancement of human potential through that. And it occurs to me that the way you described cosmological consciousness is an expansion of capacity for taking in the universe and also mirroring it and reflecting it back out. And I was interested in the way this discussion has evolved because one thing about expanding capacity to me is expanding the capacity to take in what appear to be contradictions. For example, the contradiction or the apparent contradiction of the second law of thermodynamics and self-organization. And I like to look at that in the way Niels Bohr looked at it as generalized complementarity. And I'm wondering if you can say anything about the connection maybe that you're thinking of or not thinking of between transformation and human potential and the capacity to take in complementary or seemingly paradoxical notions.
Say it one more time. Say it one more time.
So just wondering if you have any thoughts about the connection between how we advance human potential, for example, in psycho-spiritual transformational initiatives, how that relates to cosmological consciousness and that expansion of the ability to take in aspects of the universe, perhaps aspects of the universe that appear to be contradictory or paradoxical.
That's great. Let me, that's great, Teresa. Let me try to say something about the first one. The first one. So what might I have to say about transformation of human consciousness and possibly how this relates to human potential? Okay. Okay. I would think let me just try this. Okay. All right. maybe just to look at the idea of potentiality. Okay. And just to connect it to what I presented, let's try this. Here we go. So the question might be this. The question a person might ask is, where is a human's potential, right? So, you know, I'm in second grade and I have a teacher and, you know, Brian, you've got to work for your potential. And I had this idea of sort of like a kind of a vague thing inside of me that I had to kind of work to develop. And maybe there's some truth there, but the way I would like to think about potential is that when it came out when we're talking about the two dimensions of a human. So the story that made a big impact on me, this goes back to what John was talking about, resilience and so forth, but the story that made a big impact on me was the way in which, if you look at interactions in an ecosystem, many of them are mortal enemies. And I remember reading that phrase, mortal enemies. I mean, so, and then, but like if you take a classic predator-prey relationship between like a hawk and a mouse, So this actually goes to the second part of the question too. I'm going to talk about potential in a way that includes a paradox. All right. So here it is. So the hawk has a desire, wants to get the mouse and eat the mouse. So that's the desire on the part of the hawk. Now, if you give the hawk the supreme control over the universe, then it will actually, instead of working so hard to catch the mouse, it could slow the mouse down, right? And then it'd be easier for it to catch the mouse. It could kick back for an hour and a half every evening, not work so hard to eat. But then what happens is that then the hawk starts to lose some of its speed. So, and then after a while, the hawk can't even fly. I mean, we've seen this happen, right? So it turns out that by giving the hawk its wish, it leads to degradation. Now, there's an example of a paradox. There's a way in which a desire on the part of a being shouldn't be granted. It should be frustrated in order for the excellence of form to take place. But my main point is this: where is the potential of the hawk? The potential of the hawk is in the system. It's not inside the hawk alone. It's in the system. So for instance, it is the hawk's potential is owned by the mouse. Isn't that bizarre? That's how our universe operates. It doesn't give us our potential. It gives our potential to our enemies. You know? And so that and once again, in a bizarre way, the tension, the fight, the struggle, that's necessary. And this goes back to a Christian principle. All right. So the whole idea of loving your enemies, I'm sure it's in more than Christianity, but I mean, a way of seeing it in the evolutionary terms is that our enemies are custodians of our potential. So for instance, here's my enemy. My enemy is a corporation that will go out and just eliminate life in order to make some money, right? That's my enemy. So I think about that all the time. And by thinking about it and by trying to find a way to express what I have to say that will be convincing to a corporate CEO. In other words, you see how my own potential is tied up in this corporation that I hate. I mean, I don't want to pretend I hate what they're doing, but I have to become intimate with them, because there's no way I will be able to express myself in a way that will work. So I think you see that the potential. And then just to maybe give one last line this way, that what I was trying to say by looking out at the universe and we're seeing that which created us. You see, if we could actually look out at topsoil and not just see something that we should take care of. No, 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 no. But to see topsoil as that which generated humanity. I mean, it generated life. I mean, you know, it's been around for millions of years. It's what gave rise. The earth's topsoil gave rise to our consciousness. So that is what I'm thinking, that if we can make that change in consciousness, suddenly we'll realize that the earth community as a whole carries our potentiality. We don't even know what we can become.
Good answer? Yeah.
Amen.
Amen. Amen. So I think we have time for one more question.
He's my mentor.
Yeah. Is there someone who hasn't spoken maybe? Or if not, then... Okay, come on in.
All right, then it's Steve again.
Hi, Steve.
About what happens when you emphasize the self in self-organization. Now let me bring it down to earth. We say that wild is self-willed. We say that we are now in the Anthropocene. My greatest fear is that the Anthropocene will mean that one species has tamed, enslaved all of the others, which is the extinction of self in those beings. And as you sort of just said, that will mean the extinction of self in ourselves.
I couldn't improve upon that. That's beautiful. I love that. I love it. Exactly. Yeah, that's beautiful. I guess I want to connect that statement, which I love so much, to another phrase from my teacher, Thomas Berry. And he said, he was saying, if we lived on the moon, our consciousness would be as bleak as the lunar landscape. So I would say that, along with you, that if we allow the Cartesian consciousness in the form of a hypercapitalism to transform our world into what it wants to transform our world into, our consciousness will be as bleak as a shopping mall. We don't want that. we want to be brought alive by the wildness of the earth community. So that was a great statement. Thank you.
Well, we're coming to the end of our time together with you, Brian. I know I'm not speaking just for myself when I say thank you for the last 2 hours. You know, Whitehead says that, he says, echoing Aristotle, philosophy begins in wonder. And he continues, at the end, when philosophic thought has done its best, the wonder remains. And I think you really welcomed us into the wondrous universe that we inhabit, that we are a part of, that we are aware of, and that is aware of itself through us. So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. Thank you. I appreciate it.
Yeah. So
be part of it. Thank you. So great to be part of it all with you. All the best. All the best. Bye for now.
Enjoy the rest of your night.
Thank you.